Hey, what is up guys? This is Nishi from MST.TV here, back with another Market Watch episode. Today we're covering a few other odd cards that have been trending on the market for one reason or another. We have the 250th YCS happening this upcoming weekend, and that is going to bring with it a ton of changes as we should see the format become a bit more established. And I'm sure we'll also see some interesting or surprising techs from players as well. So while we wait for those results, we're going to cover some cards that have fallen through the cracks over the last couple of weeks, as they are still cards that you guys should keep an eye on going into the next couple of formats. Let's get started. First up, we're looking at Grave of the Super Ancient Organism. Now this is a really straightforward floodgate that we talked about a few months ago when Farfa topped while running this card at a large event. It's pretty straightforward. It prevents level 6 or higher special summoned monsters from attacking or activating their effects. Now in the context of today's game, this card is potentially really useful against 3 top tier meta threats, Kashtira, Labyrinth, and Branded, as all of them rely on special summoning large monsters in order to play the game. Of course, there are exceptions or ways for those decks to play around it. Kashtira can still use Birth to normal summon really big bodies, and Labyrinth has a ton of different trap cards at their disposal that could out it. And then of course there's all of the different ways that you can remove back row like Cosmic Cyclone and Lightning Storm, which is seeing play because of the runic strategy. However, in a format that's so incredibly diverse, where it feels like there's maybe a dozen different decks that you might have to play against somewhat regularly at any large event, having a floodgate that can potentially shut down 3 of the biggest threats this format is an extremely efficient use of extra deck space. Fortunately, this card did have a couple of recent OTS tournament pack printings, once as a super rare and once as a common. Either of those versions is going to cost you just a couple of dollars now. However, the 2 older versions of the card are up quite a bit, with the Ultras from Raging Battle up at $20, while the Ultimate Rares from the same set are currently $30. I think that moving forward, the best course of action here is to offload your Ultras and Altis while the prices are so high, and just pick up a set of Supers for yourself to use instead, since the card seems to be more useful specifically because of the nature of the current format that we're in, and it's very likely to trend downwards in price as we move out of this format and into the next one. Up next, it is Super Heavy Samurai Soul Peacemaker. So as we've mentioned a couple times before, we have some new Super Heavy Samurai cards coming up in Cyberstorm Access, and we did already talk about Soul Piercer a couple of weeks ago. Now one other card that is already released, moving up in price now, is Soul Peacemaker. This one lets you equip it from your hand to a Super Heavy Samurai monster, and then turns that monster into a Lone Fire Blossom, where you contribute it to special summon another Super Heavy Samurai from your deck directly. Now over in the OCG, the Super Heavy Samurai deck is really solid, and it looks like it'll be especially strong with them remaining untouched on the most recent OCG ban list. Of course, we don't know how the game will look here in the TCG, especially if we have another ban list coming out in the next month or two, but naturally everybody is scrambling to pick up the cards that are already out just a little bit early to be as prepared as possible. Soul Peacemaker is just a one-of, but it only had 2 different rare printings, once in Invasion Vengeance and once in the Megatins from that year. So the last printing actually came out back in like 2017, which was more than 5 years ago. This is something that'll probably be really annoying to find copies of. Like, I doubt many people will have them just in their trade binders at locals, so you might be stuck diving through bulk to try to find a copy or two. But it is worth it since these are around $3 to $5 per copy, depending on which version you find. This is definitely a card that you will want to dig up out of your bulk and set them aside if you are able to find them, as I'm sure that players will be looking to pick them up over the next couple of months as they prepare for Cyberstorm Access. The next card we're looking at is Interrupted Kaiju Slumber, but specifically the secret rare version. So recently we've talked about a lot of different kaiju monsters, including Gameciel, Kumongous, and Dogorin. And it all seems pretty reasonable because they're basically a form of spot removal that can be really difficult for your opponent to play around. However, Kaiju Slumber is potentially another really useful side deck piece that makes those side decked kaijus even stronger. Kaiju Slumber is basically a dark hole that puts 1 kaiju on either side of the board, so a board wipe against those decks that happen to not have any protection. However, while it's in the graveyard, as long as it's not the turn that it was sent there, you can actually banish it to search for any of the kaijus. So especially in the games that go on for a few turns, right, this card can be a board wipe and then be used again later on to find you spot removal if your opponent happens to rebuild part of their board. Fortunately, Kaiju Slumber does have a few different printings. I think that each the super and ultra rare are under $1 right now. However, the secret rares from Battles of Legend Heroes Revenge are the highest rarity version of the card, and those have gone from being $2 to $3 a couple of months ago to now being $7 to $8 per copy. The secrets do look a lot nicer and they are much harder to find, so if you don't have any copies of this card already, you might want to grab a set of the ultras or supers for yourself. It definitely feels like a lot of players are moving away from Lava Golem and Sphere mode in favor of the various kaijus, so you'll want to make sure that you have access to this card as well as the kaijus moving forward. Alright guys, before we go any further, I do want to remind you guys to check out MST.TV. Tombucks and I have been working really hard to bring you guys some new products, and they are some of the best that the community has around. Personally, I really like the rough over sleeves. They fit Yu-Gi-Oh sleeves inside of them perfectly, without that inner sleeve sticking out at all. Perfect for your extra deck and even main deck if that's what you want. On top of that, we have the new 2023 playmat with the infinite MST logos in the background. That one's really cool. It looks like an endless maze going on there. And then of course, we have our extremely smooth black and white sleeves, perfect for your main deck. They shuffle really well and feel amazing. We have the NFT sleeves, which have been super popular for loading up your binders, and then dividers and subdividers to help you keep your collections neat and organized. Honestly, regardless of if you're a player, vendor, or collector, you'll definitely find something that will improve your overall Yu-Gi-Oh experience, so make sure that you hop on over and check out MSTmerch.com. Up next, we have Platinum Gadget. Platinum Gadget is a Link 2 monster that requires 2 machines to make, and at first glance the card seems pretty underwhelming, since it can't be used as Link material when it's summoned, and gadgets haven't been used since Gold and Silver Gadget were used back in ABC format. However, Platinum Gadget plays a very specific role in Super Heavy Samurais, as the most useful of its effects allows you to special summon a level 4 or lower machine from your hand to a zone that this card points to. Super Heavy Samurais can use this card as an extender, and they can even special summon Cyberstein out to use its effect if you happen to have drawn it. I don't think that this card is a staple in the deck the way that it's being played in the OCG, but I do think that here in the TCG, this card will see more play as a situationally useful extender. The card came out in dual power and hasn't seen a reprint since then, so it's currently sitting at $3 to $4 a piece. If this card was still $1, I would be all over it, but at its current price point, I don't think it's worth investing in too many copies of this card now. If you still can grab them at your locals or something for maybe $2 a piece, I think it's a decent card to hold on to for now until Cyberstorm Access comes out. We just need to be especially careful in case this card sees a reprint in something like an OTS tournament pack. Next up is another cool trap card, though it's a bit more limited in terms of its application. We have Magic Deflector. So this is a really simple normal trap card. As for the rest of the turn, you can negate all equip, field, continuous, and quick play spell cards on the field. Of course, this is strongest against the Runic deck, since it shuts off all of the Runic quick plays as well as Fountain. Now, depending on what variation you're playing against, this can be really devastating or just somewhat impactful. Obviously, if it's Naturia Runic, maybe they've used a Baron or a Barkion to negate your Deflector, and they still have some other form of interruption. But if you happen to play against something like Pure Runic, then they'll basically be unable to do anything. Now, while this card can shut down the one strategy entirely on its own, Magic Deflector is more limited in terms of its application, only really being useful against the Runic deck. I guess technically, against something like Kashtira, right, you could shut off the field spell and Lance, but you're probably better off using other options in those matchups. But depending on how the next ban list goes, if Runic remains untouched while everything else gets hit, then maybe it becomes the deck to beat, and Magic Deflector will be more necessary in order to deal with Runic. Now, that being said, Magic Deflector has just 2 different printings. The super rare from OTS Tournament Pack 3 is the one that has spiked, currently sitting at $9 per copy. The other printing is the common from Abyss Rising. Those are still surprisingly cheap at under $1 per copy, but seeing as they're so old, they might actually be worth grabbing and holding onto if you don't want to have to pay up for the supers. So this is a weird one that I definitely wasn't expecting to have to talk about, but ultra rare Melthy of the Forest has almost completely disappeared off of TCG Player. Melthy's sprite is a sprite variant that has become fairly popular with a lot of players now. I mean, part of it is probably that the Melthy cards are just cute, sure, but at the same time the Melthy cards do add multiple points of interruption that you can use to disrupt your opponent. Melthy of the Forest is naturally one of the best cards for the archetype, as a generic rank 2 monster that searches for a Melthy card from your deck. And also, if a Melthy card is returned to your hand, you target an opponent's monster to negate that monster's effect and stop it from attacking. That's two really useful effects in one generic rank 2 monster, which is really cool to see, and that's why ultra rare copies of this card have jumped up to $7 now, despite being $2 to $3 for most of its lifetime. Now, if you just want to play Melthy Sprite and you're okay with using a cheaper version of the card, you can get the tin super rare version for under 50 cents still, and then it would actually match a lot of the other Melthy cards in terms of rarity. But of course, if you want the card's highest rarity printing, then you'll be looking at trying to pick up the Ultras, which came out back in Rise of the Duelist, a relatively new set that is already notorious for having a bunch of cards that have shot up in price because the set was relatively difficult to find. And finally, the last card I want to talk about is more just something that everyone's eyes seem to be on. It's Visastar Frost. So I think we've actually talked about this card a few times before, as it has kind of taken over like that Fallen of Albaz role in connecting a bunch of different archetypes together. Visastar Frost is something that has never really seen much competitive success, but has always been pretty pricey because we know that new archetypes are going to be supported by the card, and you never know what's going to be able to abuse it. I think that this card did see a little bit of play in Tearlament and Scareclaw, but it hasn't really been like a key or core piece or anything like that. However, in Cyberstorm Access, we do have the Mana Dome archetype coming out, and I believe that Visas is actually going to see play there, though of course we don't know exactly how good the deck is going to be. It's not like there's anything recently that has happened with this card. This is just something that I keep an eye on, so I wanted to remind everyone about it as well. Right now, the secrets and the ultras from the sneak peek are right around that $20 mark, which is a bit on the higher end. I think historically this card usually sits between $12 to $15. If the card does become really solid, I could see it eventually going up in price. However, if you aren't really a big believer in the card, maybe you recognize that this is one of the higher price points that the card has been at recently, and you sell the card off to someone who's really hyped up for building Mana Dome in just over a month, and try to find an opportunity to buy it back in the future once the deck has kind of flopped. Alright everyone, that is it from me for today. Best of luck to all of you that are attending the 250th YCS. It sounds like it's going to be a lot of fun. I really wish I was going. If any of you guys happen to have one of those like the entry mats that are extra, I kind of want to pick one up. Hit me up on Facebook or something like that if you can ship me one. But hopefully you all enjoy your time and stay safe out there. Anyways guys, if you did enjoy today's Market Watch, please make sure that you let me know by hitting that thumbs up button for me. Also, make sure you leave a comment in the comment section down below. Let me know what you guys think about the cards we talked about today and what other cards are currently trending. And of course, if you haven't already, do make sure that you guys hit that subscribe button to get all of the latest and greatest stuff from both Tombox and myself. And until next time, guys, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV.